Go. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari. Kopidana Balaba Grivadari Jaya Grivadari. Kopidana Balaba Grivadari Jaya Grivadari. Yasodanandana Raja Dhanaranjana Jaya Raja Dhanaranjana. Yasodanandana Raja Dhanaranjana Jaya Raja Dhanaranjana. Yamuna Dhiravarachari Jaya Kunda Bihari. Yamuna Dhiravarachari Jaya Kunda Bihari. Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari. Radha Madhava Jaya Kunda Bihari. Kopidana Balaba Grivadari Jaya Grivadari. Kopidana Palapa Grivadari Jaya Grivadari. Yasodanandana Raja Dhanaranjana Jaya Brada Dhanaranjana. Yasodanandana Raja Dhanaranjana Jaya Brada Dhanaranjana. Yamunatiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari. Yamunatiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari. Yamunatiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jai Vishnupad Paramhangsa Ravidakacharya Asadhara Siddhi Shriman. His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Haribol Slava Zabrani Bhaktam Slava Shri Guru Shri Gurangi. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Te Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatyade Siddharane. Om Agyana Tvarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksuramilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Prajana Sayitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakans Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabando Dagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishuvana Sudadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapa Tribhyascha Kripa Sindhuvyevacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 11, King Indra annihilates the demons, text number 8. Tadidam kala rasana shanam jagat pashanti surayaha narishanti na shochanti Tatra yuyam apanditaha Tadidam kalarashanam Jagat pashanti suryayaha Narishanti nashochanti Yatra yuyam apanditaha Tadidam kalarasanam Jagat pashanti suryaha Narishanti nasochanti Tatra yuyam apanditaha Tadidam kalarashanam Jagat pashanti suryaha Narishanti nasochanti Tatra yuyam apanditaha. Ladies. Tadidam kalarasanam Jagat pashanti suryaha Narishanti nasochanti Yatra yuyam apanditaha. Tat. Not difficult, we can try again. Tat. Better. Therefore, idam, this whole material world, kala rashanam, is moving because of time eternal. Jagat, moving forward, this whole universe. Pashanti, observe. Swarayaha, those who are intelligent by admission of the truth. Na, not. Rishanti, become jubilant. Na, nor. Shochanti, lament. Tatra, in such. Yuyam, all of you demigods. Apanditaha, not very learned, having forgotten that you are working under eternal time. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Seeing the movements of time, those who are cognizant of the real truth neither rejoice nor lament for different circumstances. Therefore, because you are jubilant due to your victory, you should be considered not very learned. Apparently, this is where Krishna got these verses from Bhagavad Gita. Or maybe he got it from the Bhagavad Gita that was spoken earlier. Purport. Bali Maharaj knew that Indra, king of heaven, was extremely powerful, certainly more powerful than himself. Nonetheless, Bali Maharaj challenged Indra by saying that Indra was not a very learned person. Bhagavad Gita 2:11, Krishna rebuked Arjuna by saying, Asochan avashochastvam pragavadam shabashase katasums agatasums cha nanu shochanti pandita. While speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Thus, as Krishna challenged Arjuna by saying that he was not a pandit or a learned person, Bali Maharaj also challenged King Indra and his associates. In this material world, everything happens under the influence of time. Consequently, for a learned person who sees how things are taking place, there is no question of being sorry or happy because of the waves of material nature. After all, we are being carried away by these waves. And what is the meaning of being jubilant or morose? One who is fully conversant with the laws of nature is never jubilant or morose because of nature's activities. In Bhagavad Gita 2:14, Krishna advises that one be tolerant. Tams tatiksha svavarata. Following this advice of Krishna's, one should not be morose or unhappy because of circumstantial changes. This is the symptom of a devotee. Devotee carries out his duty in Krishna consciousness and is never unhappy in awkward circumstances. His full faith that in such circumstances, Krishna protects his devotee. Therefore, a devotee never deviates from his prescribed duty of devotional service. The material qualities of jubilation and moroseness are present even in the demigods, who are very highly situated in the upper planetary systems. Therefore, when one is undisturbed by the so-called favorable and unfavorable circumstances of this material world, he should be understood to be Brahma Bhuta, or self-realized. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 18:54, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Shochiti Nakangshiti. One who is transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. When one is undisturbed by material circumstances, he should be understood to be on the transcendental stage, above the reactions of the three modes of material nature. Read it again. Seeing the movements of time, those who are cognizant of the real truth neither rejoice nor lament for different circumstances. Therefore, because you are jubilant due to your victory, you should be considered not very learned. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatunde Ve Gauravani Vacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskyadyade Satarne. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna begins his instruction by telling us that we're not this body, that the body is always changing. And I think we've heard that. How much we realize it is an individual case. But in any case, whether we realize it or not, it's an eternal truth that every living entity's body is changing, but the soul within the body, ourselves, who are conscious of this body, we're not changing. The only thing that's changing is our experience of this world that we're in. Now, wouldn't it be nice to realize that we're eternal? That every time you put another candle on your birthday cake, you didn't lament about it? Throw the candles on, we don't care. So we like to realize it, but the question is how to realize it. So Krishna begins to tell Arjuna, what is the process of realizing it? He just doesn't say you're not this body. He says, Matra sparshus tu kontiya, shitoshna sukadukada, agama paino nityas, tam tatiksha svabharata. Tam tatiksha svabharata. Learn how to tolerate and not be disturbed, because the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and the disappearance in due course are like the appearance and the disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O sign of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Yam hina vyantyante purusham purusharshiva samadukha sukha dhiram samritat vaya kalpate. Person who's not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. An intelligent person knows that the aim of life is liberation. What is that liberation? It's liberation from our being disturbed by our material circumstances. For the impersonalist, it's an extremely difficult task. And for the devotee, it's also difficult if we're attached to this material world. If we're attached to our dreams of what our existence will be like in the future. And if we're attached to our lamentations of what the past was and how it wasn't perfect. If we can go back in our time machine when we were 5 years old and retake that spelling test, then our life would be much better now. So that's all lamentation. If I can only live again, I could do things better. But here we are now, we've had billions and trillions of bodies, and we're still not getting it right. As a matter of fact, many souls have failed the test, and they're in the lower species of life. So it's much more likely, and every subsequent birth will go lower rather than higher. We learned that 1 + 1 is equal to 2. When we were 5 and when we were 6, we kept on insisting it's actually 3. And we failed the test every time, and still we keep on insisting. You should change the test score, that's all. So similarly, to tolerate, Krishna says, Tani sarvani samyamya yukta sitamatpraha vashehi yasyendriyani tasya pragyapatishtita. One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. So it's not just tolerating, which is extremely difficult for the soul to do, because we have nothing to do but to play around in this material world, and the only thing to do in the material, we have a choice in the material world. Either we hanker and lament, or we become Krishna conscious. Now, if we don't really believe that much in Krishna consciousness, we really think we're making an invaluable, sincere effort to hanker and lament. We're doing something valuable with our time, even enjoying our lamentation. Because there are different rasas. There's the rasa of compassion. There's rasa of ghastliness. There's a rasa of dread. There's a rasa of chivalry. There's a rasa of laughter. So there's so many rasas. So when we're crying and lamenting, still we're the hero or the heroine of that lamentation. We're still in the center of the universe, and we're enjoying it. Oh, I'm the lowest. I'm the worst. I'm the greatest because I'm the lowest. I'm the most low. As one devotee told Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen. And Prabhupada responded different ways when the devotees said that. One time he said, if you're the most fallen, why don't you do something about it? Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen. Prabhupada said, you're not the most anything. Now the history of the Srimad Bhagavatam and even the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's two kinds of persons described. One is the devotee, and he's always tolerant. And the other is the non-devotee. He's never tolerant. And there's someone in between who's generally very tolerant, aspiring devotee, but not quite perfect devotee, and sometimes he loses his tolerance. We don't find Hiranyakashipu being tolerant to Prahlad. Prahlad was chanting Hare Krishna. Now most of our parents are not so tolerant either, but they usually don't try and kill us because we're chanting Hare Krishna. But Hiranyakashipu was so intolerant that Prahlad Maharaj just said Hare Krishna, and Hiranyakashipu made elaborate arrangements to kill Prahlad because he was so intolerant. But Prahlad was completely tolerant. And he didn't have to practice tolerance. Oh, that trident, ooh. No, he just fixed his mind upon Krishna, and he didn't even notice what was going on. Because he had the advantage of getting the full mercy of Krishna, and therefore he wasn't, as far as I know, actually pierced by the tridents or bitten by the serpents. And even he was thrown over the mountain, when he landed, the rocks became like pillows. Now you can try it and see if Krishna will save you, but it may be a hard lesson to learn. Prahlad Maharaj was a Shuddha Bhakta, and therefore he was fully dependent upon Krishna, and whatever Krishna wanted, he accepted. Now, on the way down, falling over a mountain, we may have second thoughts. Maybe I should have learned how to relax when I fall before I did it. And I hope there's some first aid where I'm landing. So with such a mentality, obviously Krishna goes far away. That's called lamentation. Only when our consciousness is neutral, when we're not worried about what's going to happen, masuchaha, can we actually fix our mind upon Krishna and leave it up to Krishna. After all, he keeps on saying he's God. And if we actually trust him and we fix our mind upon him, then probably the best outcome possible will be there. Now, we can't blame Krishna if something happens which is undesirable. Jatayu fought against Ravana, and he got hurt. Undoubtedly, his mind was completely fixed upon Lord Ramachandra, but externally he appeared to be hurt, and he even left his body. But because his mind was completely fixed upon Lord Ramachandra, saving Sita, therefore he was in ecstasy, whatever happened to his gross body. Similarly, if we are convinced that what happens to my gross body is secondary to what happens to my soul, myself, and that if I'm in ecstasy, what am I going to care what happens if I'm perpetually in ecstasy? What am I going to care about what happens externally if I serve Krishna to the best of my ability? And leave it up to Krishna what's going to happen. Even it says in the Nectar Devotion, Krishna came to one Brahmin and asked him to give him half his body. Krishna asked this, he came in the dress of a Brahmin and told this devotee that I'd like your wife and children to saw off half your body and give it to me. Pretty gruesome. But he gladly did it because he knew it was Krishna's desire. He knew that this Brahmin was actually Krishna and that he was not going to be sawed in half because he wasn't his body. He had understood that, and therefore he was happy to serve Krishna in that way, like Dadichi. Didichi was a great sage, and the demigods came to him and asked him for his body. Now some demigod came to me and asked me for my body. He said, forget it. Find someone else's body. But they needed Didichi's bones because he was such a great sage. He infused his bones, his whole body, with so much energy. Indra needed it for a thunderbolt, his bones. And Didichi said, sure, take it. But he was not thinking, my bones are me. He was thinking that this is just my vehicle. Like if I had a car, and Indra came and asked me for my car, I definitely consider it, giving it to Indra. Car, sure, Indra. Because then Indra would have become indebted to me. Or what do I care? Krishna sent Indra, give him my car. I don't have a car anyhow, Indra, so don't waste your time. The whole idea is, if one has actually concentrated his mind upon Krishna, then one will not be disturbed under any circumstances. And if one is placed in circumstances and tries to conquer the mind and place it upon Krishna with one's intelligence, then one will actually become liberated from one's material circumstances. It's not that we have to wait till our minds are fixed upon Krishna before we can become Krishna conscious and tolerant. No, the idea is every moment in this material world, especially in Kali Yuga, is an opportunity to learn tolerance. And how do we know if we're learning tolerance? Because we're fixing our mind upon Krishna. Not that I'm going through a horrible period in my life and now I'm sincerely praying to Krishna. Now the horrible period has disappeared and I don't need Krishna anymore. Wait till another horrible period comes and I'll pray to Krishna more. No, our so-called relief from our distress is also another phase of the illusory energy called happiness and distress. So therefore, when we're happy, sometimes it's even more difficult to remember Krishna. Because we think, what do I need Krishna for? I'm happy. That's the whole aim, is to become happy. That's why I prayed to Krishna in the first place, to get free from my distress. And now that he made me happy, what do I need him for? Therefore, Shudras are lamenting and they approach Krishna out of lamentation, out of distress. They're called artis, those who are in distress. And then when they get artis, they become materially prosperous. Generally, they forget Krishna. Many devotees come to the movement, Prabhupada said, with some hidden motive, and when they become economically a little well off, then they leave the movement and try to go out and enjoy again. Therefore, after, as it says, Yesham andikatam papam, jananam punya karmanam, those who have passed their lives performing pious activities and have conquered sinful reactions can engage myself, have freed from the dualities of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. So after getting free from our distress, which we're causing ourselves by engaging in sense gratification, and then having a pious life where we're in harmony with the laws of nature. We don't eat too much, we don't eat too little, we're not in anxiety, etc. Fresh air, clean water. That's not the end of the story. Now my life is fine, I don't need Krishna anymore. As I mentioned before, the devotee in Los Angeles who inherited $25 million, which would now be probably $200 million, he went home to get his inheritance, and after getting his inheritance, he sent back his japa beads and all his books and his dhoti and everything else, and said, I don't need these anymore. They've served their purpose. But after that, if one wants to go further, because it's free choice, it's not that we're obliged to go back to Godhead, that I became a devotee and Krishna's going to force me to go back to Godhead. He's going to drag me back to Godhead. No, the next thing is, one has to learn tolerance, tolerate sinful reactions. Now, tolerance comes in many different ways. We have to tolerate, first, the most important thing we have to tolerate is our own ideas, our own conceptions. Those conceptions create this idea, he's my friend, he's my enemy. I like the way they look, I dislike the way this person looks. I like the way they smell, I hate the way they smell, etc., etc., etc. Attachment, aversion, which are all born of whether this person is going to serve my sense gratification or the person is actually going to be an obstacle for my sense gratification. Or this person is simply useless because he doesn't help me, doesn't harm me, he's useless. If he vanished from the face of the earth, so what? I wouldn't miss him, and therefore he's useless. No one has to learn, tolerate sinful reactions. As a matter of fact, our whole life, generally speaking, is one sinful reaction after another, until we begin the process of Krishna consciousness and learn to tolerate them by fixing our mind upon Krishna. And when we fix our mind upon Krishna, then the result is, in Krishna's presence, our heart becomes purified by the bliss, the ecstasy of being in Krishna's presence that burns away the reactions to our sinful activities. Itaidam so samrido ganira bhasmat satkru terjana ganagni sarvakarmani bhasmat satkru tejana. Just like the blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, so does the fire of transcendental knowledge burn to ashes all the reactions to one's previous activities. So what is knowledge? Jnanam gayam gadam gamyam riddhi sarvashna tishtitam. That I am knowledge, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I'm the object of knowledge, I'm the goal of knowledge, I am situated in everyone's heart. So Krishna is knowledge. If one knows Krishna, he's said to be the knower of everything. And if we don't know Krishna, factually speaking, our knowledge is useless. Shrama evihi kevalam. So in Krishna consciousness, it burns like firewood turns firewood to ashes, so it burns our reactions to our previous activities. So all we have to do is fix our mind upon Krishna by following the process of devotional service. And then we'll make progress. We're not going to become perfect immediately. We could if we wanted to, but we don't want to. We have too many other things. We're not even aware of what we're wanting. Too many other motivations we're not even conscious of. We can become conscious of them gradually. We just look around and see what we like about people and what we dislike. That's all our own reactions. Whatever we're thinking about others, generally speaking, is just a manifestation of our own consciousness. So you can learn a lot by just looking at others and finding out how you feel about them. You can find out, because you're feeling like that, that's just a manifestation of your own consciousness. It's not a manifestation of what's objective reality, just a manifestation of what we're feeling. Therefore, Krishna says, one who has conquered, a man has to elevate himself by his own mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. For one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends, and for one who has failed to do so, it's the greatest enemy. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. Such a person, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. So we want to reach the super soul by not muddying the waters of our consciousness with becoming attached to our feelings or our conceptions. We don't deny them, we just don't identify ourselves with them. If we feel a certain way, we shouldn't deny it, but we should see it in terms of Krishna consciousness. If someone's coming at us with a knife about saying, I'm going to kill you, we shouldn't think, well, maybe it's just my mind. Maybe I just don't feel about the situation properly. I should think positive. No, there's an objective, there's a reality, however we may perceive it. And we have to react according as we think Krishna would want us to act. if we fix, just like Ambrish Maharaj, when Durvasa Muni threw the fiery demon at him to kill him, then he fixed his mind completely upon Krishna, and because he was such an elevated devotee, therefore Krishna came and threw his Sudarsana chakra and killed the fiery demon and chased after Durvasa Muni. But we may not be in that position of being able to concentrate our mind. We may have to duck the knife. And then as we concentrate our mind upon Krishna to the best of our ability. So we have to act intelligently also. We have to use the intelligence that Krishna is supplying to us so we know how to serve him in this world while we're trying to fix our mind upon him. So we're not supposed to be naive, we're supposed to be intelligent in Krishna consciousness. Or as Krishna says, which is Tasmat Sarvena Kaleshu Mama Yusma Yujacha Mayarpata Manobudira Mama Vaishat Yasamshaya. Therefore, Arjuna, you should fix your mind upon me, and at the same time you should follow your prescribed duty of fighting. With the mind and intelligence fixed on me and everything engaged in me, you'll attain to me without doubt. So we have to learn how to act in this world for Krishna and at the same time see things in relationship to Krishna. See Krishna and see how everyone and everything is factually related to Krishna. Then we'll attain Krishna without doubt. And if we get attached and averse, the symptom is we forget Krishna. And forgetting Krishna, whatever we're doing, maybe if we're doing something in the mode of goodness, it'll help us so that one day while we're acting in the mode of goodness or advancing the mode of goodness, we'll be more easily remember Krishna. But generally speaking, we should accept Krishna consciousness directly and not try to make progress through the modes of nature. Although we generally act in goodness, because the goodness is the platform of tolerance. It's the platform of nai nishoshiti nakangshiti, neither hankering nor lamenting, and treating people as Krishna's servants, everyone, all living entity, as souls within a body, pandita samadarshanaha, rather than someone separate from Krishna, as if anyone or anything in this world is separate from Krishna, that somehow or another Krishna is asleep because it's Chaturamasya, although it's almost ending, so maybe he'll wake up and start getting people to act properly to me. Now, everyone has an eternal relationship to Krishna, and not a blade of grass moves without Krishna's sanction, and forgetting that's called Maya. And then as soon as we forget that, then there's hankering, lamentation. Then as soon as we see things apart from Krishna, then there's hankering, lamentation. Not that we see things in relationship to Krishna and we think that everyone's acting in the same mode of nature, that everyone's a pure devotee. No, we understand everything's coming from Krishna. We can see how things are related to Krishna, how the souls are related to Krishna, but they're bewildered by the modes, and therefore we should respond according to how Krishna would like us to respond. Like when Haridas Thakur was brought before the Muslim magistrate, the Qazi, and the Qazi was saying that you're a Muslim, you have the highest status, but somehow or another you become affected by bad association, and it appears that you're becoming a Hindu. So Haridas Thakur, he heard the magistrate talking to him like that, so he realized it's the illusory energy talking to me. He didn't think, oh, everyone is Krishna, he must be right, maybe I shouldn't become a Hindu. Krishna is telling me through this Muslim that I should stay a Muslim. No, he understood it's the illusory energy talking to me, and he responded accordingly, as Krishna would want him to respond. He just said, he didn't disagree with him. He said, well, so many people have become, so many Hindus are becoming Muslims. So if one little Muslim like me becomes a Hindu, what's the big loss? You got plenty of other people converting. So what? What will you lose? Of course, the Qazi didn't like it very much. because and therefore he had Haridas Thakur beaten through 22 marketplaces, but Haridas Thakur was protected by Krishna because he was fully Krishna conscious. Now we ourselves, we have to pray to Krishna for the intelligence in every circumstance, how to act appropriately so we don't forget Krishna. Of course, the chanting of the holy names should help us more easily remember Krishna. It's certainly easier to remember Krishna than by chanting Hare Krishna than chanting Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck. Although Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck are also related to Krishna, but rather not as directly as the holy names. So the holy name is a gift, so that if we keep on chanting Hare Krishna, it's more likely that we won't be bothered by this ever-fluctuating material energy. On the other hand, we can chant Hare Krishna and be offensive also without understanding things properly, and therefore not understand the value of the holy name, of chanting it, and not be able to take care of it, of utilizing the chanting properly. In any case, being tolerant in itself will not help us very much. Being tolerant so we can actually be happily engaged in chanting Hare Krishna, that will automatically help us remember, or Krishna will automatically appear within our remembrance. If that we're giving up the material world just by being happy, not hankering, lamenting, not being averse or attached to anyone, not that we're indifferent to people, but we're not trying to exploit people through our attachments and aversions. Being happy and then chanting Hare Krishna happily, and then Krishna and his associates will appear in our memory, and we'll become happy by their association, actually blissful, by actually being able to feel their presence and the ecstasy, the love that they're always emanating. So I'll stop there. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj. When you were describing this, how to make mind friend and an enemy, to be engaged in Krishna consciousness and also seeing this everything in connection to Krishna, is practicing sattva guna and being absorbed in chanting of the holy name, like the process to making our mind friend, or let's just say practicing sattva guna, like having our activities balanced and like this. Is this how our mind becomes our friend and then supports, or like this?
Well, we practice, Krishna says, that sattvam sukhe sanjayati jnana karmani bharata. That's probably wrong. Sattvam sujayate jnanam rajaso lobha eva cha pramado moha tamaso bhavato jnanam eva cha. That from the mode of goodness, real knowledge develops. And then the other verses I said, from real knowledge comes karmana sukritasya yahu satikam nirmalam palam. That the result of knowledge, when applied properly, is purity. Purity means the absence of ignorance and passion. Then we're not disturbed by them, and we can do something on the spiritual platform. But if we come to the mode of goodness, and we don't do anything on the spiritual platform, then the result is we'll become attracted, because we'll become attracted eventually to the lower modes again. Because Maya always knows, unless when it's a pure devotee, then there's always some hidden attachment that we may not even be aware of. But Maya knows about it, and therefore she'll present that hidden attachment that we have, and we'll fall down from goodness. So if we stop advancing by the practice of Krishna consciousness, then naturally we'll become allured by the modes of material lower modes again, and we'll give up goodness eventually, or even the attempt to become good.
So what we do is simultaneously practice goodness and developing a higher taste.
We practice goodness in Krishna consciousness because it makes it easier to practice Krishna consciousness if we work in the mode of goodness. It's like if you want to, as I've given the example before, if you want to fly from here to Belgium, to Brussels, the easiest way is to go to the airport. Then catching a flight to Brussels is relatively much easier than standing in your house trying to wait for the car to pick you, for the plane to pick you up. So similarly, the mode of goodness is our gateway to the transcendence. So generally we come to the mode of goodness first, which means we're not disturbed anymore by ignorance and passion, we're not distracted by them. And when we're not distracted, then we can fix our mind upon Krishna.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for the class. And as you were speaking about tolerance, I understand in principle the value of tolerance in difficult circumstances or in jubilant circumstances and so on. Some thoughts come to mind. Domestic violence is a real issue. And what are your comments on tolerance in such situations?
Well, as I said, tolerance doesn't mean we're foolish. Tolerance means that we see things with full perspective. We understand what modes of material nature are working and what the transcendental vision should be. So we try to, if we're in a situation where it's not conducive to Krishna consciousness, then we have to rearrange our situation so it is conducive to Krishna consciousness. But there are so many factors. There's so many degrees of, quote, domestic violence. There are so many different factors that go into it that one has to see things with full knowledge.
Thank you.
All right. Hvala. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande.